Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am Angela Love-Zaranka, Program Director for Lactation Education Resources. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Normally, I do this presentation of 90 days and counting, creating a study plan with my esteemed and dear friend and colleague, Sekeita Lewis-Johnson. Unfortunately, Sekeita is feeling a little under the weather today, so you've just got me. So who am I? I mentioned I'm the Program Director for LER. I am a board certified lactation consultant. I started offering lactation support over 30 years ago, which is hard for me to even say that number, over 30 years ago as a peer supporter. And then I became a board certified lactation consultant. I've worked in a hospital setting. I have worked in the community setting in my own private practice. I've served on different boards of directors, including the IBLCE board. And that is why I have this information to convey to you today. And that's why I'm hoping that we can have a good opportunity to provide you with some details and some additional information on how you can be ready for the IBCLC exam, which is happening about 90 days from now. So if you would like to ask us a question or just want to make a comment, please do so. If you notice here, the blue arrow is pointing on the GoToWebinar interface for the question box, that little spot there which says questions. And directly under that, there's something which says handouts. And so if you do want to take a look at some of the handouts, the couple of handouts that we have provided for you, please click on the handouts button. Or if you have questions, please do type it into the question box. And why don't you practice now and go ahead and type in where in the world you are participating from today. I always love to see just how many different countries are represented by the people who are joining us live. Now, if you are participating today on a mobile device, then take a look at the green arrow and you'll notice that it's pointing to that question mark. And you can click on that button and do the same thing, comment or ask us a question. Now, one thing I want to note about the questions today is usually when I'm doing it with dear Sekeita, usually we will go back and forth and one of us will take a look at what's going on in the forum and to answer some of the questions and or flag them so that we know, oh, we want to answer this one live. So if you type a question in and if we don't get to it right away, just know that chances are it's been flagged for me to answer live. So do know that we will see them, and I know that we will see them because we've got two amazing people supporting the webinar today. One is Julie Grimes. Julie is from our phenomenal customer support team. She too is an IBCLC, and she will be taking a look at the different questions and flagging them for me as needed. If you're having any tech concerns, we've also got the amazing Jill Stem. So Jill is with us today, and she can provide any sort of support that you may need if you have any sort of tech issues today. So do remember to take a look at the handouts, and let's go ahead and get started. So this meeting is to help you to sort of feel organized and well prepared when it's time to actually take the exam. And it's really important for you to plan today for taking that exam 3 months from now. This is a quote which is coined by James Baker, a former Secretary of State, which states, "Proper preparation prevents poor performance." And so it's helpful if you are taking the exam in 90 days or even taking the exam next year. It's best to get organized before the exam so that you can enact the different pieces which are necessary in order for you to feel prepared when you walk into that test center or you're ready for that remote proctoring. So after today, remember, please don't put off studying until the last minute just because you're dreading it. I know it may seem overwhelming. Pace yourself, break it down into smaller steps, and that way you won't feel quite so overwhelmed. Okay, so let's talk about developing your plan and how to study for the exam. Creating an individualized plan to prepare and study is best. Consider your learning style first. Are you a visual or kinesthetic learner? Are you more of a visual or auditory learner? Do you like to see or do you like to hear? Do you prefer a logical, stepwise approach or one which is more organic and fluid? Do you learn best working on your own or do you prefer working with a group of people? We may integrate aspects of different learning styles to meet our needs. So developing that plan which is right for you is the most important thing. And hopefully during today, you're going to find some of the strategies which may work for you regardless of your learning style. So the first thing to do is to get your head in the game, is to take action on knowing those abilities. Now, don't take this too lightly. Take the time and reflect on this question soon. If you're someone who's prone to anxiety, the best thing you can do is to start today. You know some people do well in cramming and some people don't. Believe in yourself. Know that you have the skills, the knowledge, and the resources that you need in order to be successful for the exam. Listen to positive people and seek the company of those that are like-minded, those that really understand what your goals are and how self-determined you are. You will find those people who can support you along the way. Become self-disciplined, and discipline in the definition of that word of teaching yourself. In other words, become a self-teacher. You have those skills, be that teacher for yourself, and set up that schedule so that you can follow it. And I'll provide a little bit more information on that topic in just a minute. Studying, particularly when you must continue to take care of your job or your family or continue to go to school, is the coordination which is important to consider. It does take time and planning to get your head in the game. So now just take a moment, just a little homework here, and list at least 3 action points that will help you to pass the exam. And list at least 2 people whose association can support you in your journey. So taking that time to think about what learning method works for you, which works best for you. If you, for example, want to include flashcards, start making those flashcards now. If you took our 90-hour course and you still have access to it, review the entire course. Look over your notes from the course that you took and continue to take notes from those notes. At this point, you should be able to add notes from textbooks or maybe from different protocols. It may identify areas where you feel confident and where you may need to take a deeper dive. If you attended webinars or in-services given by lactation consultants, take a look at those notes as well. Remember, this is a practical exam. It's not about memorizing the entire core curriculum for interdisciplinary lactation practice. You can relax about knowing, for example, some things like the cellular level of cells, the mitochondria, but you want to have the practical knowledge about how the permeability of cells impacts drug concentrations in human milk. You see the difference? It'll be helpful for you to take a look at the IBLCE detailed content outline topics and see where those strengths and opportunities lie. Now, first of all, don't be too overwhelmed by this slide. And some of you may see, if you take a look at the slide, I put a note to myself, but I'm not going to listen to it, and I am going to present this slide anyway. Now, for example, I alluded to the fact that some of us are linear learners and some of us are not. When Sekeita was teaching nurses, this is her slide, by the way, so that's why initially I wasn't going to present it, but I think this is a really important concept for some people who this may be very useful. So when Sekeita was teaching nurses, she loved the example of using a concept map, and that's what this is. Concept maps are based on how your mind works, how you visualize learning, and what makes it easier for you. When she applied this concept to lactation, she looked at the detailed content outline and noticed that this tool could be used for certain topics of that outline. Here's her example of a concept map for the lactation endocrinology system. She found this in the detailed content outline under Physiology and Endocrinology, subsection B, Endocrinology. The first point is hormonal influence of milk production, and that's what this concept map is. For example, let's sort of break this down a little bit. You can see oxytocin listed here. Well, what does it do? It ejects milk. What part of the brain does oxytocin come from? The posterior pituitary gland. She left thyroid hormones TSH and T4 there, but there's space for more in that blue box. Notice that she included dopamine. She also could have included cortisol, but she didn't want to make it too busy for you. It's simply an idea of what a concept map looks like. That's why I wanted to show you this slide. And it may be an easy way to retain information and sort of see it and put it all together in your mind. Some of you may find this very helpful. Others may be very overwhelmed. As with all the information in this webinar, use what you need and just leave the rest. So how to know what to know? Well, it's not possible for you to know everything. However, the range of information that you do need to know is relatively limited. According to IBLCE, everything that has been published in books or journals in the past year may be included on the exam. Now, this is an incredible amount of knowledge. The exam is an entry-level exam, and it's designed to separate those who will be competent novice lactation practitioners and those who will not be safe working with families. So be at ease that it is an entry-level exam. In other words, it's not intended for me, who's been in IBCLC for a really long time. The exam is very practice-oriented, which means the more experience you have, the better. If you only practiced in one setting, consider widening your scope of practice by attending a group or being in a setting which may be different than what you're familiar with. For example, if you work in a hospital and work in a NICU setting or a special care nursery, maybe check out a local support group meeting or visit a clinic where lactation support and clinical care are offered, such as an outpatient lactation clinic. Maybe you can assist in a pediatric office, visit a NICU lactation consultant if you work in the community, or follow someone in private practice. Even a few days of observation in another setting can be very enlightening. So research shows that material that's learned over a long length of time is retained better than cramming at the end. Even if you made it through high school or college using that last-minute cram strategy, don't do it for this exam. It's too important. Get organized now. Put together your own study materials is one of the most effective ways of learning. Create your own study notes as opposed to downloading someone else's notes and taking a look and studying from those. Those personal study notes help you focus on the most relevant information to support your understanding of the topic. As you rearrange and actually write the information, this process helps your working memory to recall the key points quickly. Put together all of your textbooks, lactation study course materials. Create that study place that is dedicated to your exam study. And set up an hour or 2 blocks, 2 hours of time in order to do the readings and to take any practice exams. Study sessions should have the exact same weight as any other important commitment. Don't skip and don't put it off. Personal study is essential to your success in the exam. Be prepared. A reasonable amount of time of study will help you to feel more confident. Now, if you have a lot of clinical experience or you're taking the exam for the second time, make sure that you also make time to study. Don't assume that you can pass without studying because you're just so busy in your clinical practice. Now, if you have been actively practicing as a lactation consultant and keeping up on all the latest research and attending conferences, maybe you could pass without studying, but you'd feel awful if you didn't. Reward yourself at the end of a study session. Take a hike, get lost on your favorite social media platform, take a nice relaxing bath, watch an episode of that new show on a streaming platform, eat a treat, anything you consider a reward for yourself for your efforts. So now if a group study is your thing, then try to find that local study group or study partner or an online group of people with different clinical backgrounds, but who are committed to consistent study and meetings. If there are even a couple of people in your area getting ready for the exam, it helps to bounce ideas off of one another, share anxieties, and study resources. This is actually how I think what it helped me to pass the exam all those years ago. So set up that study schedule and use the study guide that we've provided you in the handout section to plan your strategy. Plan your study time when you're most alert. Is that the morning for you? and pick a time when you're least likely to be interrupted. If you have children, probably doing it right when you pick them up after school or they get home from school or when they're getting ready for bed, that may not be the best time for you to study. And you may have to negotiate with your family for some time where they agree not to interrupt you. If you have kids, create a family project to help you pass the test. Now, this is a screenshot of the 30 days handout. So it's not intended for, January 7th, do this, January 8th, do this. These are simply what you can do 30 different days over the next 90 days. It provides a list of topics on the IBLCE detailed content outline and activities that you can do to prepare. So remember, it is a 30-day study plan, but it's 30 days which are interspersed over the next 60 or 90 days. And there are some topics that you may want to spend 2 or 3 days on because you're not very familiar with them. And so you may need to take extra time, especially in different areas where that's not your primary form or area of practice. Make sure to pace yourself. Take off a few days for family obligations in the midst of it if you can, or just take that break for your brain. The handout can be found, as I said, in the handout section of the webinar. Now, this is a visual plan, and it's relatively old school, but I think it sort of brings the point across. This is what a study plan could look like. So here you've got your planning out dates, see the little stars here, and there is content that you're going to cover on each day, and what study partner is going to help you to remain on track and accountable. So of course, urgent situations can arise, so it's important to prioritize accordingly. If you do have that study partner, consider planning together. You could choose topics to work on. For example, and this is a bit of an example of how I studied as well. Let's say that Huda and Tamika and Jessica are my study partners, and Tamika and I are planning to meet next week. We've chosen the topic developmental milestones. Before meeting, it's important that I study the texts that I have agreed to study, and I know that Tamika is going to study the text that she has agreed to study. Therefore, when we meet, we can review similarities and differences in the information. And if we find a conflict, we can then find other resources to review and come to a decision on the best information available at the time. And indeed, this is how I think I was able to pass the exam. There are all sorts of different textbook suggestions. Again, you want to find something which is comprehensive or one which may be different than what you're used to studying. These are just a few of the books which a lot of people do find helpful when they are studying for the exam. Ideally, get the latest version of whatever textbook that it is. However, if the textbook which you have is one previous edition, that may be okay to get you through. It's helpful if you can ask people, for example, what books did they use that they liked the most? And they're all written in different styles. And so do take a look at the different textbooks, talk to other people, and see what textbooks they liked and why. Okay, I'm going to just pause for just a moment here from the content. I'm going to take a peek at the questions and see if Julie has flagged anything for me. And so far, no. It's great to see that we have people from all over the world, literally. So wonderful. Someone's in Australia. There's another person who is who's from the Netherlands, but currently traveling in Argentina. Wonderful. So yes, that's great. Okay, good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and keep going and move forward. Let me take a quick little sip. Structure and strategies. Okay. So what are some things that you can do to retain some of the information that you're going to be reading? Well, mnemonics, which is using words or first letters of a sentence to remember things. That's one way that you can do it. For example, LATCH is a system which was developed to help lactation care providers remember what they need to look for, right? L stands for latch, A stands for audible swaddle, T stands for nipple type, C is for comfort, and H is the amount of help which is needed. So that's one tool that you could look for, but those are the things that you want to observe and know more about. A previous student suggested the way that they remembered which hormones come from which part of the pituitary gland. They remembered the phrase, the acronym PAP for prolactin is developed or created in the anterior pituitary, PAP, prolactin anterior pituitary. And OPP for oxytocin is created in the posterior pituitary. So OPP and PAP is how they were able to easily remember which part of the pituitary generates prolactin and oxytocin. There's also that old trick of using the first word of a sentence to jog your memory. The old sentence, which is here on the slide, you may have learned in a biology class, and it may help you remember the number of the cranial terms. Make up some of your own to remember lists of things. If there are lists of information to learn, then you want to sort of divide and conquer, and you can subdivide the information into smaller segments. Consider the rule of 3. 3 items seems to be the easiest number of things to remember. Let me back up here. So take practice exams. You can take practice exams in our QBank module. It is a wonderful tool to help you with your studies. You can practice the questions in tutor mode to learn the rationale behind the answers, or you can take it in test mode to simulate the online testing experience. And so these practice exams, we have almost 600 questions mapped to the detailed content outline. And Julie actually is one person who is one of the monitors of QBank and has done a phenomenal job of not only having the questions in QBank and in the form, but after you're done taking the exam, let's say you decide to do it in tutor mode, it's actually going to tell you why the correct answer is the correct answer, why the incorrect answers are incorrect, at least for most of them, and also page numbers or research where you can go and find out more information. And there's a comment section under each one of the questions as well. So if you have a comment or you have a question and say, well, I don't know about this, or, gee, I saw a piece of research which negates this, or what would we do about this? We actually respond to those questions. And so that way there's a robust history and dialogue underneath several of the questions where we sort of talk through why this is the correct answer, why this is something which is important. And so a lot of people really love our QBank module, and I do highly recommend it. So taking our practice exam through QBank is one good way of finding out, sort of getting a general sense as far as where you are in your studies. So another thing that's important is to know what is normal. For example, knowing what normal infant weight gain looks like, the normal stages of development. And the reason why you want to know that which is normal is because it's going to help you when things are abnormal and need some sort of intervention. Explain yourself. So study difficult topics with others, especially those who don't know anything about lactation. Why? Well, if you can, for example, let's say you are waiting in line and there is a friend of yours is with you in line, and you really want to try to explain about the physiology or endocrinology of lactation. If you're able to take out your notes, your little flashcards, and if you're able to explain it to someone, a friend of yours who you're just waiting in line, if you can explain it to that person, someone who knows nothing about lactation, then chances are you've mastered that topic and you're like, okay, I got this, especially if the person, of course, can understand what you're saying. Then you're like, oh, okay. Or if you get stuck somewhere, then you can say, oh, gee, I don't really remember that part. I don't know, or you use a lot more jargon or medical terminology, and the person that you're talking to seems lost. Then you understand, okay, I need to break this down into simpler terms, try not to use the jargon, so that if I can convey it and I can explain it to someone else who isn't a lactation consultant, then I know this topic and I can continue to move on. So some basic information. The exam consists of 175 questions. Some are regular questions and some are questions related to pictures. And some will be case studies types of questions where you'll answer one question and then the next question is going to build on it. Questions on the exam are often referred to as items, so you may hear that term being used. You'll have 4 hours to complete the exam or 240 minutes. The entire exam is multiple choice questions. Each item is made up of a stem or the actual question and then several choices, usually 4. The stem of an item can be phrased as a question, a partial sentence, or a best choice. In this example, the stem is about the onset of copious milk production. It can be phrased as a question, what is the stage when copious milk production is produced? A partial sentence, the onset of copious milk production is called, or a best choice question. What is the best description of the onset of copious milk production? They're all asking about the same concept, just in different formats. And here you'll note what the answers are: secretory differentiation. I know I didn't say that right. So sorry. Secretory activation, galactopoiesis, and involution. And notice that there's a slash there for lactogenesis 1, lactogenesis 2, lactogenesis 3, and lactogenesis 4. It's because those are the older terms for the for this answer, for talking about milk production and when it occurs. And so you may see it in some texts listed by the numbers. The newer texts and the newer resources should talk about the secretory activation, galactopoiesis, and involution. I can say galactopoiesis, but differentiation, not so much. Okay, so with these multiple choice questions, it's important to read the stem of the question and then answer the question mentally. Think about what the correct answer would be. Read the choices. You can usually eliminate the ones that you know are not correct so they don't distract you. And then you can concentrate on the differences between the choices that are left. Tentatively choose the first answer on the list that seems correct. Then compare the other selections to that one. If there is a better answer, then select that one and continue on. Maybe another answer will be even better. Do a final check to ensure that you read the question correctly. If you don't find one that you think is correct, read the stem again, carefully, to make sure you understood. The perfect answer may not be one of those choices, so choose the best one. And if you're not sure, venture a guess. Note that all of the information in the stem is there for a reason. The distractors are in the possible answers and not in the stem. Watch for words that can change the meaning of what came before. Words like but, altogether, however, in spite of, regardless of. So it's important to watch the context of the question. The answer can be right, but not correct for that situation. So that's why it's important to really check the context of the question. So the choices are going to fall into 3 categories. There are sophisticated distractors and unsophisticated distractors. An unsophisticated distractor is something easy that you might know anyway, or something that's obviously wrong. And of course, then there's the correct answer. So there's going to be 3 choices to eliminate. So be mindful of the different types of distractors. So as I was saying, you want to read the stem of the question thoroughly, then each possible answers thoroughly, and indicate your answer. Your first answer is most likely correct, so don't second guess yourself on that one. Don't read more into the question than what is actually there. Use the options themselves to provide you with hints about the things you need to know. Watch for any always scenarios. Rarely is there a situation in lactation that falls into the always category. Usually, and most of the time, yes, always no. There may not be any of the all of the above choices for the answers. The reason why is that these are generally easy to answer and don't show that you know the material well. As I said, your first impression is probably the right answer. So be reluctant to change your answer unless you get a flash of inspiration and know that your second impression is the best answer, or maybe you read the question wrong. I'm sure that many of you have taken an exam, changed your original answer, only to find out that you had it right the first time. I know I have, and it's the worst feeling really, even if I pass the exam. So in taking a multiple choice question, know when to guess. A multiple choice test, know when to guess. If you're not sure about the correct answer, eliminate the options you know are definitely wrong, and then make your choice. Then flag the question so you can reconsider it at the end of the exam if you have time. And if you really have no idea, you have a 25% chance of being correct by guessing. And if you can eliminate at least one option, then you increase your odds by 33%. Now, if you're not sure about a number answer, one thought is to toss out the high and the low and maybe consider the middle range numbers. If you have no idea of the answer, check for lookalike options. Check for the most inclusive option, the option that contains the most information. That may be something which is helpful. Think about what it might be similar to. Anything you have seen or read about that was sort of the same thing. Relate it to what you know and then make that educated guess. If one of the options is totally unfamiliar, be suspicious. Something that you've never heard about or seems unrelated to the STEM is likely going to be a distractor. Now, there are some exam statisticians who recommend setting up a predetermined strategy for guessing on the questions that you're clueless about. After eliminating the wrong answers, then always select the first option or maybe the last option. It's up to you. But if you always select the answer in the same position, then you increase your odds that your guess will randomly be correct. I mentioned before that about half of the questions are going to be based on a picture. With picture questions, you may have to either define a diagnosis or a condition, or distinguish between normal and abnormal. For example, examples of this include determining a child's age by their posture, size, or behavior, or possibly to determine a problem, such as a compression stripe on the nipple due to a shallow latch, or asymmetric breasts, as you can see in this example. A picture may also be used in a case study where you're asked to recommend a care plan and decide what you would recommend first or next. Picture questions may take a little longer to answer than the text-only questions, since you have both the picture and the answers to consider. When answering a picture item, read the question first, then look at the image. The question will define what the purpose of this particular picture is, and you'll be able to focus on what the question is referring to faster. If the answer is not immediately obvious to you, visually divide the picture into quadrants. Take a look at each quadrant closely. Images may not be as obvious as the picture on the top, which is massive mastitis. A more likely image is the redness seen just under the nipple in the image below. It's a little bit more subtle. So read the question first, look at the picture, read the question again, and then look at the image one more time. Then choose the right answer. Now, I do want to comment that the images on the IBLCE exam are not perfect. Some are going to appear dated. Some of them may not seem clear. As someone who takes photos to teach breastfeeding concepts, I can tell you that it is challenging to get good clinical images with the proper lighting, setting, and context that's crystal clear. Remember that IBLCE is comprised of IBCLCs. They have thoroughly reviewed the question and image to ensure that all of the information is there for you to answer the question, and they're IBCLCs from around the globe. One final note is that many of the images are of lighter skin tone people. Many of the lactation consultants who have taken clinical pictures and shared them with IBLCE took them on people who are predominantly white. So if you do notice this, I just want to make you aware that yes, indeed, many of the images that you may see on the IBLCE exam are going to be of people with lighter skin tones. It is unfortunate, and that is where we are today. I'll leave it there. So what are some of the common problems that test takers run into? Well, the first is reading too much into the question. It's really important that you take it at face value, that all the information they want you to consider is there. As the old saying goes, Don't look for zebra in New York City Central Park. Look for the most likely answer. In Central Park, you're more likely to see a horse than you are a zebra. This was reiterated by someone who took the exam the last time. As they said, the likelihood that a parent or baby is presenting with something rare or exotic is very low, compared to the likelihood that, let's say, it's mastitis or some other sort of issue with the breast. So it's important to prepare yourself for those everyday scenarios. Remember to watch for qualifiers, such as always, never, least likely, most likely, the first thing that you would do would, or the best choice. Answer the question they are asking. That may seem obvious. I've missed questions that I knew the answer to, but didn't carefully pay attention at what they were asking. Reread the question before you make your final selection of answers, just to be sure you have the right concept. Don't pick the first good answer. There may be a better one. Read them all and compare. Now, if you start eliminating wrong answers and get down to one, then look at it and say, that's not right. Start over again, and that's okay. You may look at a question and your mind goes blank. Don't panic. Take a nice deep breath. Proceed logically. Remember the STEM, read it over. Read over each of the options, eliminate the wrong options, and make your best guess. Mark the question for review at the end of the exam. For those of you who are advanced practice nurses or midwives or physicians, do remember this very important point. You need to answer the question like an IBCLC, and that's really tricky when you are trained and have been practicing for years in your primary profession. And so do remember the scope of practice of an IBCLC and keep your mindset in that frame when you're taking the exam. So what to do when you get stuck? Well, you may look at a question and your mind goes blank, as I said, so you don't want to panic. You just want to start bringing extra oxygen to your brain. Relax your shoulders as well. So taking those deep breaths and just take a look at the question, proceed logically, and come back to it again if you have time. Another suggestion would be for you to think of a real life situation similar to the one in the question. Are there any clues there? Look for clues in the adjectives or the qualifiers, and use your common sense as well. The exam writers are not trying to trick you. They want you to exemplify that you have a level of knowledge that is safe and prudent for lactation practice. Also, another comment is don't choose the most familiar answer just because you're happy to see something that you know. Is it really the right answer? If not, then try to tease out clues from some of the other choices. And if you're really stuck, again, don't spend too much time. Pick an answer and go back. Just keep up your momentum. Okay, before we get to exam content, I'm going to take a drink of water and see if there's anything else here. People are comparing other exams that they've taken for other health professions. Possibilities, yes. Oh, someone just asked a good question. Is the exam on paper or on the computer? It is on the computer. Paper and pencil, they did that for quite some time, but it's no longer there. And so if you want to know more about QBank, lactationtraining.com, and then you'll see a drop down for exam prep, which is great. Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, good. Seems like we've got all the questions so far. Awesome. Thanks, Julie. She's in there answering questions like crazy, which is wonderful. And yes, you will have time on the computer. You will have time to go back and to review the questions if you need to. Okay, good. So going to the next slide on exam content. All right, so the exam is known as a reference-based exam, which means it's based on the current medical literature. It's based on literature such as textbooks. And take a look also at the compendium of research that has been validated, peer-reviewed, and in the pipeline for the past few years. There's also the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine protocols, which are phenomenal. Things that are not included on the exam are unvalidated research. That means additional study that has not been done to support the conclusions, or additional research that did not support the original study. Anecdotal materials, verbal statements, websites, conference presentations are not going to be included on the exam. Only things that are written and in a peer-reviewed journal or textbook are included. For example, the textbook Breastfeeding and Human Lactation is an evidence-based book. Remember not to go down a rabbit hole and think of the ifs or the buts or the one in presentation. You know, if you hear yourself saying, well, I heard of a case where, you're going down a rabbit hole. So remember, you want to make sure that you're taking a look at the most common scenarios as opposed to the one-offs. The exam covers all of these topics as they relate to breastfeeding and lactation. So again, you can go to the IBLCE website and to the Commission's website in the document section, and you can access the detailed content outline. And actually, I have it right here. I do keep it with me a lot. It's not just for this webinar. So the picture that's there is back when it was in color. Actually, this is in color. What am I saying? I only printed it in black and white. So this is something which is a phenomenal thing to study from. You can print it out if you wish. And I know some groups of candidates who will create a Google Doc and have others add relevant content to the outline, so everyone can add, you know, content to the outline. And there was a person that I met at a conference, and they had actually were in that Google Doc, and they actually had printed it out and they had brought it to the conference with them so they could study in between the conference sessions. So something which is helpful. Now, I want to give you some information about 2019 data. And so IBLCE produces and publicizes a test analysis report. And that report used to be more detailed than it currently is. But what IBLCE will do is they publish a broad overview on the exam performance based, and they usually will send it out a few months after the exam. So I have information here from the 2019 exam and by different cohorts. So one, that was when they were doing it in April and October. So notice that in April, 81.31% of people passed the exam. And in October, it's 72.55 people passed the exam. Look at that, a strong majority of people passed the exam. So why is there a difference between April and October? In April, they only present or provide at least currently, they only have the exam in English. And in the second administration, it is in October, it is in multiple languages. And so that is one of the things to be mindful of. Also take a look at the recertification by exam, that one particular cohort. And this is when the exam used to be required in order to recertify. You had to recertify by exam every 10 years. And you'll notice that the people who are recertifying by exam actually scored higher. And remember that those are people who've been practicing for a while and were IBCLCs for at least 10 years. And some of those who were in that sort of recertification by exam cohort were actually people who were teaching other people about lactation consulting and how to pass the exam and what things you needed to know. And so I think that's the reason why that number is skewed just a little higher. So as I mentioned, the detailed content outline used to look a little bit different. And so you'll notice that under disciplines, the names are slightly different than in the current detailed content outline. I've kept this slide here so that you can take a look and see the exam results from 2 consecutive years. And you can see the topics which give people the most difficulty. So if you look at the topics that scored below 75%, it's immunology and infectious disease. Also growth parameters and developmental milestones. There was a slight shift with pathology, which dropped, pharmacology and toxicology, which improved, sociology, psychology, and anthropology declined, and interpretation of research improved. So these are areas where you might want to spend a little bit more time when you're thinking about, well, what area should I study? Taking a look at this and knowing where many people were tripped up is a good place for you to focus. Also notice that there you can see where it lists items. You can see the number of items in each individual section. And indeed, in the detailed content outline, which I have printed out from 23, it will actually list on here the number of items which are included in this section of the detailed content outline on the IBLCE exam. And I have to, full disclosure, I didn't check that before this webinar. And so just as an FYI, they did used to give a certain parameter of questions which would be offered in the different disciplines on the previous detailed content outline. Okay, these are also chronological periods that will be covered on the exam, and they're everything you'll see here from preconception through toddlers. And the majority of questions are going to be clustered in that early newborn time frame. Now here are the test scores for the chronological stages. While you can see that there are some areas of improvement, for example, within the 15 to 28 day group, and there is a decline in that prenatal setting, it appears that candidates are very good at the first few days, but they seem to have difficulty with older babies. So it's really important for you to find pictures of babies at different stages that you currently do not work with. There are resources that are available online. I know the CDC used to have a library. I don't think they do anymore, but I know Stanford University, I believe, does have a library, and actually CDC does. They've got developmental milestones. They've adapted it within the past few years, but it is one of those resources. There's another book called the Breastfeeding Atlas, and also the Melanated Mammary Atlas, which can provide you with more information. The Melanated Mammary Atlas doesn't have necessarily the ages and stages. However, the Breastfeeding Atlas does. But again, these are two more resources that you may want to consider if seeing pictures of different skin conditions and or skin tones, different conditions in skin tones and or babies and developmental milestones are something that you need to study. And one thing that many people do find helpful is, for example, if let's say you're looking at a picture of someone and they're showing you pictures of their baby or their nieces or nephews or something, you can ask how old is that baby, but look for yourself and see, gee, what are the visual cues that this is a 4-month-old versus a 6-month-old or a 12-month-old, right? What are the differences that you're going to observe? And so asking the person who's showing you those wonderful pictures and bragging a bit, that may give you some visual context clues as well to know the age of the baby if you happen to see that on the exam. Okay, so bottom line, don't panic. You may be asking yourself, what should I know that I don't know that might be on the exam, but I don't know? You will be prepared. You're starting now. Believe in yourself. Haven't the families that you've been working with over the past several months or years benefited from your information? Remember to pace yourself. Take those vocabulary words with you wherever you go. Use little pockets of unexpected time to study. Watch yourself. Watch yourself for signs of excessive stress. Symptoms can include mental issues, social issues, and physical problems. For example, mental stress can show up as being forgetful, confused, agitated, or spacey. Social stress can show up as being grumpy, irritable, argumentative, or withdrawn. And stress can show up in physical problems such as cold sores, bladder infections, eczema, GI upset, or catching every single cold that's out there. Do what works best for you in order to reduce that stress. Okay, I believe we've gotten through everything which is here, at least on the slides. And so let me take a pop in here and see what Julie has flagged for me. Okay, so someone is asking, what is a passing score? And that's a trickier question, and the reason why is because IBLCE changes what that passing score is going to be. Now, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but they have a psychometrician which actually takes a look at each individual exam question and how it actually performs. In other words, does this question help to discern the minimally competent IBCLC versus someone who is not a minimally competent IBCLC? And so they take a look at how each item performs. And then if an item, for example, doesn't perform well, then they may eliminate that question from everyone's exam, but then they rescore. the exam. And so the number of items that are chosen for correct answers may be different from year to year. It is somewhere within the, I think I've seen it as much as the high 70s to low 80s. So let's, sort of take a look at that parameter. I've seen it in previous years where it was more in the lower 70s, but indeed, you want to try to get, 70 to 80% of the questions correct if you're in our QBank and you're taking a look at it and you are using that as your practice, using that for practice. Okay, let's see here. Previous questions. Go ahead and pop your questions in here. So the handouts are going to be available on YouTube. If there's anything that I said that you have questions about, I do encourage you to reach out to our support forum. We have people who answer questions in our support forum 7 days a week, even over the holiday. I just met with all the customer support folks, and even over the holidays, which normally happen around the end of the year, they were going in and taking a look at the support forum. We also will answer the phone. And so if you call us, we're going to answer. If you want to reach out to us via WhatsApp, we do have that capability. It's not quite on our website, but it is going to be in the coming weeks. And so reach out to our support forum at support@lactationtraining.com, and we will answer your questions and or reiterate maybe what I said today. And I talked a little too quickly. I do know I talk quickly sometimes. So indeed, you're able to go back and check your questions. So if your application, if you've already applied for the exam, it should say that your application is either accepted or pending. If your application is pending, then remember that you may be chosen for a random audit. And so you're just going to have to give proof of your lactation didactic education, as well as the prerequisites, the university course or the post-secondary prerequisites, and the education that you have with that, as well as your clinical hours. Let's see here. So someone is asking a question about the new ABM mastitis protocol. Is that going to be included on the exam? And it's likely that it will be on the exam. Julie answered this perfectly. Although they're probably going to avoid some of the controversial topics, such as there's no such thing as plug ducts, or a prohibition against using breast massage except by experts. And so they're probably going to shy away from some of those things. And so do take a look at some of the more general principles as opposed to specific things. The new protocol doesn't completely say, oh, never do breast massage. Some people have interpreted it as that. And so just know that there are no absolutes when it comes to some of these topics for sure. The exam happens twice a year, and you have to apply for the exam 4 months prior to taking the exam, 3 to 4 months prior to taking the exam. And so be mindful of that as you're planning. If you haven't registered for the April exam, that deadline has passed. It was actually yesterday. And so if you have not decided to take the April exam and you have not applied yet, then you most likely will need to then turn around and plan to sit for the October exam. So there you are. And yes, if you do have questions about the requirements to actually sit the IBCLC exam, we do have another webinar called Real Talk, where we actually dive into the different things that you need in order to become a board certified lactation consultant. This topic is going to, this recording is going to be available in the coming days as well. So if, again, I said something too quickly or you just want to review it, you were busy, then by all means, please do. Let's see, so question about that. Enriched study program. So the difference, we do have 2 different exam review topics or products. One of them is the basic exam review, which I believe, Julie's going to correct me if I'm wrong here, which I believe has access, which does not have access to the QBank. One has access to the QBank, or actually both of them have access to the QBank. One of them does not have access to the videos. And so it's the exam review enriched, which has a lot more material in it for you to review either the videos and or QBank and or flashcards and or pictures, things like this. So indeed. And the videos are based on the detailed content outline. So it's something which is nice. There are also worksheets in the detailed, there are also worksheets in Exam Review Enriched, and we provide you with blank worksheets so that you can like fill in the blanks yourself, because remember, doing that piece of actually writing things in helps you to retain the information. And so there are, the answer keys are also in there, but I just want to mention that, you know, it is helpful if you can go through as you're listening to the videos, or if you're doing your studying, it's important and helpful if you can go through and actually write down the information yourself to help with that retention. Okay. So someone asked, do we have the passing rate for those who complete our exam prep program and those who actually pass the IBLCE exam? We do not. IBLCE does not share the number of people who, nor do we know how many people in any given cycle are actually taking the exam. So just as an FYI. For those of you who are, I'm bopping around a little bit here on the questions, so I apologize if it seems like a stream of consciousness, because it is. The next administration of the IBLCE exam is in September 2025, and the exam application period for that exam has not opened yet. It will open, I think I was reading on the website today, probably in mid-May. But again, don't quote me on that. Do go to the IBLCE website and find out when the application window is open. Okay, oh, here's another question. For the case study questions, are they also providing answers to select, or will we need to write the answer? They will provide you with answers to select. You do not need to come up with the answer yourself. And our YouTube channel is at Lactation Education Resources, the name of our company, which is great. And to those of you who are working, if you do not have a medical background and you're wondering about whether or not to become an IBCLC, again, we do have another webinar about that. I do not have a medical background. I've been working as an IBCLC for quite some time, as well as a lactation support provider. So indeed, I do encourage you, for those folks especially who are working in the community, do take the exam. And the study group that I was referencing was actually my own study group. And indeed, I would get together with different people, and it was super helpful. Since I work predominantly in a community background, I found it really helpful to talk to people who worked in NICUs and special care nurseries, and or worked, you know, postpartum, who worked with pregnant folks. I mean, I was working with some pregnant folks, but the number of pregnant people that I had access to was limited. Most of the folks were after their babies were born. And I would support people, you know, whose babies were sick or they were sick, and I would support those folks. And yet really getting information from people who were actually working on those units and working with them on a daily basis and on a regular basis was just incredibly valuable to me. So keep that in mind. Someone is asking, how many hours a day or a week do you recommend putting in for preparation? That's going to depend on a lot of things. It's going to depend on your schedule. You know, the study group that I referenced, we would get together every 2 weeks. And, you know, then there was always a time, oh, somebody was sick. Oh, somebody had a sick child. Oh, you know, I really can't make it. I have to attend this other thing. And so, you know, just sort of like mapping it out, but really trying to keep them as solid as possible so that we could keep that commitment to ourselves is something which was important. And so indeed, you know, spending that time, and especially spending the time when you know you have the time. So some folks where there may be a religious holiday and or national holiday at a certain time, indeed celebrating during that time is something which is important and people do, as well as if you can find some time to sort of carve out a little time during that, especially if you have a partner who can be helpful with the kids or additional family members who can help with other tasks that you have, that's something which can be very helpful. So there we go. Okay, good. I think that is it for now. And where can you find support groups? I think reaching out to, excellent. I think reaching out online, of course, whatever online platforms you're comfortable with. Also finding people in your community, in your neighborhood, possibly reach out to your local or regional breastfeeding lactation group, lactation consultant group, professional association. You know, they may have resources as well in order to help you to pass the exam. Reaching out to IBCLCs to find out, you know, about different study groups. Reaching out just to different folks who you just know who are either working in the community or who are working in various hospitals or pediatric or obstetric practices. Finding those people and say, hey, I'm planning to take the IBCLC exam. Do you know anybody who's also taking the exam? You'll be surprised at the number of people that you'll find. So indeed, do start planning now. Do take a look at our exam review products. We really do have them to help you to pass the exam, and start planning out those things now. Planning out those things so that, you know, if you are able to meet yourself and say, self, this is what we're going to do for the next, 90 days. This is what we're going to do. And yes, I'm going to need a little time off during this time frame or that time frame, and I'm going to get right back on it when I'm able to. That's something which is important. Great. So make that commitment to yourself and know that we are here to support you every step of the way. Again, if you have questions, please reach out to our support forum, support@lactationtraining.com. I hope you all have a delightful, lovely rest of your day, rest of your evening, and thank you so much for attending today. Bye, everybody.